Welcome to today's audiobook reading of Only the Killer Knew Her Name, a gripping novel by Serena Locke. 25 years ago, the Kingston-Bennett Group collapsed in scandal. $412 million vanished. Two powerful families blamed each other, and the real architect of the crime walked away unseen. For a generation, the Kingstons and the Bennetts lived as enemies, each family carrying a version of the truth built on anger, pride, and silence. But when Meridian Group launches a hostile takeover against both companies on the same day, Adrian Kingston and Sophie Bennett are forced to ask the question their families avoided for 25 years. What if neither side was guilty? As old files disappear, witnesses resurface, threats arrive, and forgotten names begin to matter again, Adrian and Sophie discover that the scandal was not just a crime of money, it was a crime of identity, a crime of patience, a crime committed by someone who knew how to make two families hate each other long enough for the truth to disappear. But secrets do not stay buried forever, and sometimes only the killer knows the name that can unlock everything. This is a story of corporate power, betrayal, family legacy, hidden records, murder, and the dangerous cost of choosing truth over silence. Settle in, listen closely, and enter the world of Only the Killer Knew Her Name. Chapter 1. The offer. Adrian Kingston had learned, at 11 years old, that his family did not lose. He had learned it the way children learn most things that shape them, by watching what happened to the people who did. Now 36 and CEO of Kingston Global, he sat at the head of a boardroom table that was not the one from 25 years ago. That table had been sold at auction the year his father died, a fact Adrian had never told anyone, because it embarrassed him how much it had cost him to let it go, and listened to his general counsel explain, in the careful language lawyers used when they didn't want to be the one who said the word first, that Kingston Global was being hunted. Meridian Group filed the tender offer at 6 this morning, said Priya Shah, sliding a single sheet across the walnut. 41% premium over yesterday's close. They're not asking, Adrian. They already have committed support from institutional holders, representing 19% of the float. Who's behind Meridian? Adrian asked, though he already knew the shape of the answer would be a shell inside a shell, inside a shell. Companies like Meridian did not have faces, they had structures. A holding entity, registered in Luxembourg. Ultimate beneficial ownership is not public. Priya hesitated. There's one more thing. They filed an identical offer for Bennett Holdings 40 minutes after ours. Adrian went very still. Both companies, same day. Same hour practically. For 25 years, Kingston Global and Bennett Holdings had orbited each other like two wrecked ships too stubborn to sink, each one certain the other had fired the shot that sank them both. They competed for the same contracts, poached each other's executives out of spite as much as strategy, and had not, to Adrian's knowledge, held a single joint meeting since the scandal that broke his father. Now someone wanted both of them at once. That's not a coincidence, Adrian said. That's a strategy. Damien Cole, his chief operating officer, leaned back with the easy confidence of a man who had never once, in 8 years of working for Adrian, been wrong about anything that mattered. Or its opportunism. Two wounded competitors, weak boards, distracted leadership. Meridian's just picking the lowest fruit. Both companies aren't weak, Damien. They're divided. That's different. Adrian stood, walked to the window, and looked down at a city that had watched his father lose everything, and had mostly, mercifully, forgotten about it. Get me everything on Meridian's filing history, and get Sophie Bennett on the phone. Priya's eyebrows lifted a fraction. You want to call the Bennetts? I want to call the one person in that building who might actually pick up. Damien laughed, short and disbelieving. You've never spoken to Sophie Bennett in your life. None of us have. Your father made sure of that before either of us was old enough to shave. My father is dead, Damien, And in the meantime, a company neither of us has ever managed to beat on our own terms has just decided the fastest way to take both of us apart is to do it at the same time, using a structure built specifically to exploit the fact that we'd rather lose separately than win together. Adrian's voice had the particular calm he reserved for the moments everyone around him expected him to raise his voice instead. That tells me something about whoever built this offer. It tells me they understand this rivalry better than either family does. And I would very much like to know how. Priya was already dialing. "For what it's worth," she said, holding the receiver a moment before it connected. "I think you're right. I just don't think Harold Ferris is going to let her take the call without a fight." "Then it's a good thing," Adrian said, "that from everything I've heard, Sophie Bennett has never once lost a fight with Harold Ferris." He was still turning that thought over. Where had he heard it? And why did some old, buried part of him find it satisfying, rather than irritating, when Priya handed him the phone, and a voice he had spent 25 years hearing about, and never once actually heard, answered on the second ring. Sophie Bennett was already 3 moves ahead of him, though she wouldn't have called it that. She would have called it doing her job, which was, at present, standing in front of the Bennett Holdings board, explaining exactly what a 41% premium hostile tender offer meant for a company that had spent the last 2 years quietly bleeding market share to a rival it had once been half of. "They're betting we're too fractured to fight back," Sophie said, not bothering to soften it. As general counsel and de facto crisis lead, her father, the chairman, had not set foot in this building in 11 months. A fact the board discussed only in careful euphemism. She had earned the right to be blunt with the men who'd known her since she was in pigtails. "And given how we've spent the last 5 years, I can't say they're wrong to bet that way." "You're suggesting we cooperate with Kingston," said Harold Ferris, the eldest board member, in the tone of a man suggesting she'd proposed arson. "I'm suggesting that whoever built Meridian's offer knew exactly how to split us before we even noticed we were being split. 2 companies, 1 bidder, filed 40 minutes apart. That's not luck. That's a plan, built by someone who understands this rivalry from the inside." Sophie set down her folder. "I don't like the Kingstons. I have excellent, specific, well-documented reasons not to like the Kingstons. But right now, I like being acquired by a shell company even less." "Your father built this company back from nothing after the collapse," Harold said, and there was real feeling under the old man's bluster. The particular grief of someone who had watched a friend spend a lifetime rebuilding something that should never have needed rebuilding at all. "I will not sit in this room and listen to you suggest we owe James Kingston's son a phone call." "I'm not suggesting we owe him anything, Harold. I'm suggesting that in 11 days, Meridian's tender offer closes, and if we spend those 11 days refusing to even acknowledge that Kingston Global is facing the exact same threat we are, we will lose this company on principle. My father built Bennett Holdings back from nothing too. I don't intend to be the generation that hands it to a shell company, because we were too proud to make one phone call." She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn, the way she'd learned to do in 100 negotiations where the room needed to believe she was steadier than she felt. "I'm not asking anyone's permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do, because someone in this family needs to start acting like the crisis in front of us matters more than the 125 years behind us." No one answered her. No one, notably, told her to put the phone down either. Her phone buzzed on the table. An unfamiliar Kingston Global extension. She almost didn't answer it. Then she thought of her father's face the last time someone had said the word Kingston in his hearing, and answered it anyway, because spite, she had found, was occasionally useful for exactly this. For doing the thing everyone expected her not to do. "Sophie Bennett. Adrian Kingston." A pause, the kind 2 people take when they've spent a lifetime being told the other is the enemy, and are discovering, in real time, that the sentence they're about to say contradicts everything they were raised on. I think we need to talk. I think, Sophie said, watching Harold Ferris's face go the color of old paper, you might be the first Kingston to say something I agree with. Chapter 2. Enemy Ground. They met on neutral territory, which turned out to be a private room at the Ashworth Club that neither family had set foot in for a decade, chosen precisely because it belonged to neither of them. Adrian arrived first and hated that he'd noticed himself doing it. Arriving early was a habit from a childhood spent making sure he was never the last Kingston in any room, never the one who had to walk in and feel every eye assess how far the family had fallen. He was still turning that thought over when Sophie walked in, 7 minutes late by design, he suspected, so that she would never look like she'd rushed for him. She was exactly as composed as her reputation promised, and nothing like the mental image he'd built from 25 years of second-hand hostility. He had expected, absurdly, someone who looked like an accusation. Instead, she looked like someone who had learned early that composure was armor and had never once taken it off in public. Mr. Kingston, Miss Bennett, thank you for coming. Don't thank me yet. I came because Meridian's offer is a threat to my company. Not because I've decided to forgive 25 years of your family blaming mine for something my father swears he never did. Funny, Adrian said. My father swore the same thing about yours, right up until he died still swearing it. Something flickered across her face. Not softness, not yet, but a recalibration, the look of someone updating a model with new data. Then maybe we start there, not with an alliance, with a question. What if neither of them did it? Adrian sat down slowly. I've spent my whole life being told your father engineered my father's ruin, and I've spent mine being told the reverse. Do you know what's strange, Mr. Kingston? Neither family ever produced hard proof. Not once. 25 years, and the entire feud rests on two men insisting the other was guilty. And nobody, not one forensic accountant, not one regulator, not one journalist, ever nailed down exactly how the money moved or who moved it. The SEC investigation closed without charges against either company. Read the file, Mr. Kingston. I have. Twice. It reads like two companies got framed by someone the investigators never looked for, because both families were so busy pointing at each other that nobody left a hand free to point anywhere else. Adrian felt something shift under him, subtle as a floor settling, the particular vertigo of a belief held since childhood, taking its first real hit. You think there was a third party? I think, Sophie said, that whoever built Meridian's offer filed against both of us on the same morning, using a strategy that only works if they understand exactly how deep this rivalry runs. That's not outside knowledge, Mr. Kingston. That's inside knowledge. And I want to know who's had it for 25 years. Adrian, he said, if we're doing this, you should probably use my first name. Sophie, she almost smiled. Almost. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I still don't trust you. Good, Adrian said, because I don't trust you either. That's probably the only honest thing either of our families has said to each other in a quarter century. Let's start there. They spent the next hour doing something neither of them had expected to do that afternoon. Comparing notes, cautiously at first, and then with a kind of grim momentum. On 25 years of a story, each of them had only ever heard from one side. Sophie described the version she'd grown up with. James Kingston, ruthless and cornered, forging his way out of a bad quarter by gutting the joint venture and leaving her father to absorb the fallout. Adrian described the mirror image, Marcus Bennett, as the architect, greedy and unrepentant, hiding behind lawyers, while James Kingston's reputation burned. They can't both be true, Sophie said finally. They can't both be false, either, Adrian said, which means somewhere between them, there's a version neither of us has ever heard. My father has a filing cabinet in his study he's never let me open. I always assumed it was pride. papers from the collapse he didn't want to relive. Sophie turned her glass slowly on the table, watching the light catch it. Now I'm wondering if it's something else. My grandmother has never once discussed the collapse with me directly. Not once, in 36 years. I always thought that was grief. Adrian met her eyes. Maybe it's something else too. Then maybe that's where we start, Sophie said. Not with lawyers. With the two people in our families who were actually old enough to see it happen. You want to interview my grandmother. I want to find out what she knows before whoever's behind Meridian finds a reason to make sure she never gets the chance to tell us. Adrian hadn't considered that angle, that the danger might already be closer than a hostile tender offer, that someone might already be watching to see whether either family started asking the right questions, and the thought settled over him with a chill that had nothing to do with the club's overzealous air conditioning. All right, he said. Enemy ground was step 1. My grandmother's garden is step 2. Between the club and the garden came an international industry summit in Geneva that both companies had committed to attending months before any of this began. A conference neither of them could gracefully withdraw from without inviting exactly the kind of public scrutiny they were trying to avoid. It became, instead, useful cover, two rival CEOs sharing panels, dinners, and hallway conversations that looked, to anyone watching, like the ordinary choreography of competitors sizing each other up, and were in fact the only extended stretch of hours either of them had found yet to talk without a driver, an assistant, or a badge reader logging their movements back home. If whoever built Meridian's strategy understands our rivalry as well as we think they do, Sophie said, over a late dinner in a restaurant Priya had vetted as unconnected to either family, they're not going to ignore two targeted CEOs sitting at the same table in another country. Then let them watch, Adrian said. Let them wonder what we're actually discussing. Not knowing is the only leverage we have left against someone who's had 25 years to plan for everything else. Chapter Re: What the Board Doesn't Know. Preston Hale had sat on the Kingston Global Board for 11 years, long enough to remember Adrian as a nervous 25-year-old sitting in on his first meeting, and long enough that his sudden absence from the Thursday session felt, to Adrian, like a held breath. He said he found something in the Meridian filings, Priya told Adrian afterward, in the hallway, in the lowered voice people use for things they haven't decided are alarming yet. Called me last night, said he wanted to bring it to the full board himself, not send it by email. Sighed it was the kind of thing you say in a room, not in writing. And then he didn't show up. He's not answering his phone. Adrian felt the specific cold of a fact arriving before its meaning did. Send someone to his apartment. They found Preston Hale at 11 that morning, alone in the study of the brownstone he'd owned since before Adrian was born, dead of what the first responding officer logged, almost reflexively, as a probable cardiac event. 71 years old. No signs of forced entry. A half-finished glass of scotch on the desk beside him. It would have stayed a sad, ordinary story, an old man's heart finally giving out under the strain of a hostile takeover, except that when Adrian arrived, badge escorted past a uniformed officer who recognized the Kingston name and didn't ask questions, he found Preston's desk swept completely clean. No laptop, no files, not even the leather folio Preston had carried into every board meeting for a decade. The one with his initials worn pale from thumbing it open. Somebody got here first, Adrian said, to no one, and felt the words land in his chest like a verdict. He called Sophie from the sidewalk outside, rain starting up again the way it always seemed to when the Kingstons had bad news, and she was at his side within the hour, dressed like she'd left a meeting mid-sentence, which she had. Cardiac event, she repeated, reading the same first responder notes Priya had photographed. Convenient. He told Priya he'd found something in Meridian's filings, something he wanted to say in person. And now his files are gone and he's dead. Sophie looked up at the brownstone's dark windows. Adrian, I need you to understand something about my family's history that yours might not know. 9 years ago, a forensic accountant my father hired to re-examine the original scandal died in a one-car accident 4 days after telling my father he'd found, in his words, something that doesn't fit the official story. We never got to hear what it was. Adrian felt the floor tilt again, faster this time. You're telling me this is the second time someone got close to the truth and didn't survive it? I'm telling you, Sophie said, that if we keep pulling this thread on our own, in public, the way we've been doing, meetings at the club, phone calls on company lines, we might be next. Preston's funeral, 3 days later, became the first time in 25 years that a Kingston and a Bennett stood in the same private space without a lawyer present. Though technically, Sophie had come to represent her family's condolences rather than to see Adrian, a distinction she found herself abandoning somewhere around the second hour of standing quietly at his side, watching Kingston Global's board file past a casket that held more than an old man's secrets. He was the last person who might have told us what he found before we had to find it ourselves, Adrian said, once the reception thinned enough for honest conversation. I keep wondering what he would have said if he'd made it into that room. We'll find it, Sophie said. Whatever he found, it's still out there. Men like Preston don't discover something that dangerous and fail to write it down somewhere. It's not in his character, from everything you've told me. No, Adrian agreed, it isn't. Which means, someone else already found the same thing he did, and got there first. The medical examiner's office called Adrian directly 2 days later, an unusual courtesy that Priya attributed to the Kingston name still carrying weight in rooms most people never got invited into. The cause of death would stand as cardiac arrest, the examiner explained, apologetic in the careful way of someone delivering news he suspected wasn't what the family wanted to hear. No toxicology flags, no signs of struggle. A man of 71, under significant stress, with a family history of heart disease. It's a clean death, Adrian told Sophie afterward, standing in the rain, outside the examiner's building, because neither of them could stomach going back inside anywhere with air conditioning and fluorescent light just then. Too clean. Preston played squash twice a week. He passed his physical 11 months ago with numbers a man half his age would envy. Clean deaths are the ones that worry me most, Sophie said. My forensic accountant's one-car accident was clean too. No skid marks that made sense, no mechanical failure the report could actually explain, and a coroner who signed off on it in under a week because there was nothing obvious to contradict him. Whoever did this understands that the fastest way to hide a murder isn't to make it look like an accident, it's to make it look boring. Boring enough that nobody spends the resources to look twice. Exactly, Sophie pulled her coat tighter. Adrian, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it as information, not as an accusation against your family, because I don't think it's that anymore. The forensic accountant my father hired 9 years ago, his name was Elias Cho. He left one voicemail on my father's private line before he died. My father has never let anyone hear it. Not me, not the board, not the police at the time, because by the time we understood what had happened to Elias, my father had already convinced himself that playing it safe meant staying silent. Do you think your father still has it? I think, Sophie said, that if he does, it's the only surviving piece of evidence in 25 years that might tell us what Elias actually found. And I think it's time somebody finally asked him to listen to it, instead of protecting him from having to. Chapter 1: The First Threat. It arrived on a Tuesday, folded once, slid under the door of Sophie's apartment, sometime between the hour she left for a 6 a.m. deposition prep, and the hour she returned past midnight, exhausted enough that she almost stepped over it without noticing. No postmark, no envelope, a single sheet of plain paper, block letters printed from a laser printer that could have belonged to anyone in the city. Stop digging into what doesn't concern you. The Bennett name survived 25 years of questions. It won't survive the answers. She read it 4 times before she called Adrian, and even then, she made herself wait an hour, because some old, stubborn part of her still recoiled from the idea of needing a Kingston for anything. He was at her building in 20 minutes. She hadn't given him the address. He'd gotten it from Priya, who'd gotten it, unofficially, from a Kingston global security contact, who kept tabs on Bennett executives, the way both companies had quietly kept tabs on each other for years. Another small, ugly fact of the rivalry that neither of them commented on, because commenting on it would have required admitting how normal it had become. "Someone's watching both of us," Adrian said, reading the note twice, his jaw tight in a way Sophie was starting to recognize as his version of alarm. "This isn't a random threat, it's specific. It knows you're investigating. It knows more than that." Sophie's voice had gone very level, the way it did, Adrian was learning, whenever she was closest to being afraid. "It knows to threaten the Bennett name, specifically, not me. The name, like whoever wrote this has spent 25 years thinking about that name the way you'd think about a weapon. That's not language a stranger uses." "No," Sophie agreed. "It's language a family uses about itself. Or language someone uses who's spent a quarter century close enough to both our families to know exactly which words would land." Adrian looked at the note again, and something in the phrasing snagged at him. A rhythm, a formality, the particular coldness of someone who chose each word rather than simply feeling it. He'd read hundreds of internal memos in that same clipped, deliberate register. Corporate language, boardroom language. "Sophie, I think whoever wrote this works in a building like mine. Or yours." She met his eyes, and for the first time since the Ashworth Club, the careful distance between them collapsed into something closer to alliance. Not trust, not yet, but the specific, urgent intimacy of 2 people who have just realized they are being hunted by the same animal. "Then we stop meeting in public," Sophie said, "and we stop trusting anyone who isn't in this room. Starting now." They spent the next hour building a list, not of suspects, not yet, but of everyone who had known, before that morning's board meetings, that either of them had begun asking questions about the original scandal. The list was longer than either of them wanted it to be. Priya, Damien, Harold Ferris, and the rest of the Bennett board. Marcus, obviously, though neither of them seriously considered him. A handful of assistants, security staff, the archivist who'd pulled the empty box. "It could be any of them," Adrian said, staring at the list with the particular frustration of a man used to solving problems that responded to effort. "Or none of them. It could be someone we haven't even met yet." "Then we narrow it the only way we actually can," Sophie said. "We keep working, carefully, and we watch who reacts to what we find, before we've told anyone we've found it. Whoever wrote this note is going to make a mistake eventually. Patient people always do, when they've been patient long enough to start believing no one's watching back." "You sound very certain of that." "I prosecute contract disputes for a living, Adrian. I have never once met a person who could maintain perfect discipline forever. Somewhere in the next few weeks, whoever's behind this is going to overreach, and when they do, we're going to be paying close enough attention to notice." Sophie folded the note carefully into an evidence bag she'd brought without either of them commenting on the fact that she'd thought to bring one. "In the meantime, I think it's time we finally paid your grandmother that visit." Sophie's father, when she finally asked him about the voicemail, did not react the way she'd braced for. He didn't deflect, or grow angry, or retreat into the careful silence he'd perfected over 25 years. He simply sat down at his kitchen table, looking older than she'd ever let herself see him, and told her where to find the recording. An old answering machine cassette, of all things, kept in a safe deposit box he hadn't opened since the funeral. "I told myself I was protecting you by never playing it," he said. "I think, if I'm honest, I was protecting myself. I didn't want to hear Elias tell me I'd spent 9 years hating the wrong family for no reason at all. Recording. When Sophie finally played it 2 days later in a quiet room at the bank, was 31 seconds long, the audio thin and warped with age, but the words were unmistakable, and they landed in the room like a struck bell. Marcus, it's Elias. I found something in the original wire authorizations that doesn't fit. The signature block on the Kingston side. I don't think it's forged the way we assumed. I think it's real, and I think someone used a legitimate signing credential that didn't belong to either family at all. Call me back tonight. I don't think this can wait. He had died 4 days later. He knew, Sophie said quietly, once the recording ended. 9 years ago, he already knew it wasn't either family. And he never got the chance to say who it actually was. Outside, the rain that had followed Preston Hale's death hadn't stopped for 4 days. Neither of them mentioned it. Both of them noticed. Chapter 5, Missing Records. The Kingston Global Archive occupied a sub-basement level that most employees didn't know existed, accessible by a keycard clearance, so restrictive that Adrian himself had to request it fresh. A request that generated an email trail he found himself, for the first time in his life, uneasy about creating. 25 years of financial records, Priya said, waving a flashlight over shelving that ran back further than the beam could reach. Everything before the digitization project she checked a folder. 13 years ago should be here in hard copy. Should be was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. The box marked Kingston-Bennett Joint Venture, year of dissolution sat exactly where the archive's index said it would, third shelf, aisle 9. It was also, when Adrian lifted the lid, entirely empty except for a single acid-free folder cover with no contents, and a checkout card slotted into a pocket on the inside lid, the old-fashioned kind libraries used before barcodes. The card had one name on it, checked out 11 months ago and never returned, D. Cole. Adrian stared at it long enough that Priya asked if he was all right. Damien pulled these files 11 months ago, Adrian said slowly. Before Meridian's offer even existed, before Preston died, before any of this started. Maybe it's nothing. Due diligence, an old audit. Priya, nobody at this company has looked at that joint venture in a decade. There's no audit that would need it. Adrian closed the box. I want to know why my own COO went looking for the one file that could tell us what actually happened 25 years ago, and why he never mentioned it to me. Across town, Sophie was finding her own gaps. Bennett Holdings records had migrated to a proprietary database years before Sophie joined the legal team, and when she queried the system for anything related to the original scandal, the results returned a folder structure with the right names, the right dates, and files that had been, according to the metadata, accessed and resaved 14 months ago by a service account with administrator privileges that no one in IT could currently identify as belonging to an actual employee. A ghost account, said Marcus, her younger brother, when she showed him the export. Marcus worked 2 floors below her, in Bennett's data security group, young enough still to find the whole rivalry more embarrassing than sacred, which was, Sophie thought, probably the healthiest way anyone in either family had ever related to it. Someone created it, used it to touch these files, and it hasn't logged in since. Whoever it was, knew exactly what to look for, and exactly how to cover it. Can you trace it? I can try. It'll take time. And it's the kind of thing that gets noticed if the wrong person's watching the network. Marcus hesitated. Soph, you're being careful, right? With whatever this is. I got a note under my door telling me to stop, Sophie said, and watched her brother's face do something complicated. So no, I'm not being careful. I'm being fast. She called Adrian that night to compare findings, and the shape of what they'd each found, laid side by side, made something cold settle in Sophie's chest. Damien Cole had pulled Kingston's joint venture files 11 months ago. A ghost administrator account had touched Bennett's corresponding files 14 months ago. Both dates fell within weeks of a quiet regulatory filing, one Marcus had flagged almost as an afterthought, showing that a Luxembourg holding entity, called Meridian Group, had first registered its intent to explore acquisitions in their sector. Someone started preparing this 18 months before they ever made an offer, Adrian said. Long before either of us knew Meridian existed, which means whoever accessed those files wasn't looking for something to steal, Sophie said. They were looking for something to destroy, making sure that whatever evidence still existed about the original scandal wouldn't survive long enough to complicate a takeover they were already planning. That's not opportunism, Sophie. That's a 25-year plan finally reaching its final stage. I know, Sophie said. And I think we just became the first people in 25 years to notice it happening while there's still time to stop it. Chapter 6. The grandmother Eleanor Kingston lived alone in the house Adrian's grandfather had built, a sprawling stone estate an hour outside the city that Adrian visited on holidays and little else, out of a guilt he had never examined closely enough to name. She was 83, sharp enough to still beat him at chess, and had said almost nothing about the scandal that broke her son in 25 years of Sunday dinners. "You brought a Bennett into my garden," Eleanor said, when Adrian and Sophie found her among the roses, delivering the observation the way she delivered most things, as fact, not accusation, though it took Sophie a moment to be sure of the difference. "Mrs. Kingston, I understand if you'd rather we didn't. Sit down, both of you. I've been waiting 25 years for someone to ask me the right questions. I'd started to think I'd die before anyone did." Adrian went very still. "You know something? I know your father was innocent, and I know he never proved it, and I know it killed him slower than the cancer did." Eleanor set down her shears with the deliberate care of a woman who had learned that hands betray more than faces do. "I also know that on the night everything fell apart, there was a third man in the room, younger than your father and Marcus Bennett. I only met him twice, but I remember him, because your grandfather trusted him more than he trusted either family." Said the boy understood numbers the way some people understand music. "Do you have a name?" "I have a face I haven't been able to place in 25 years, because the man attached to it made himself very good at not being remembered. But I have this." Eleanor rose, moved into the house with a steadiness that dared either of them to offer help, and returned with a photograph, curled at the edges, of a formal dinner, James Kingston and Marcus Bennett Sr. at its center, and behind them, half turned from the camera, a third man, whose face was mostly shadow. Sophie took the photograph with the particular gentleness of someone handling evidence rather than a family heirloom. "Mrs. Kingston, do you remember anything else? Anything he said?" "I remember he gave your grandfather a business card once, and your grandfather laughed and said the boy had bigger ambitions than his position warranted." Eleanor's eyes, pale and unhurried, moved between them. "I've kept that card for 25 years, in a box I told myself I'd throw away, and never did. I think some part of me always knew someone would come asking, eventually. I just didn't expect it to be a Kingston and a Bennett, in the same room, asking together." She left them at the garden table, and returned with a small tin box, and inside it, beneath a scatter of buttons and a christening bracelet, a single embossed card, the ink faded but legible. "Richard Ashford, Strategic Financial Advisory." Neither of them recognized the name. Both of them would, within the week, wish they never had to. "There's something else," Eleanor said, before they could leave, and something in her voice made both of them go still. "The night before everything collapsed, your grandfather came home unsettled, not afraid. Your grandfather was never a man who frightened easily, but troubled, in a way I only saw perhaps 3 times in 40 years of marriage. He told me he'd had a strange conversation with the young man from the bank. Said the boy had asked him, almost idly, what he thought would happen to the Kingston and Bennett families if the joint venture ever failed catastrophically. Whether the friendship between the families would survive it, or whether. And your grandfather remembered this phrase precisely, because it struck him as such an odd thing for a junior banker to wonder aloud, whether blame was a more durable bond than trust. He was testing the idea before he did it, Sophie said quietly. I believe so. I believe he wanted to know, before he ever moved a single dollar, whether the wreckage he was about to create would hold two proud families in place long enough for him to disappear into it. Eleanor's hands, steady until now, trembled faintly as she set the tin box down. I have spent 25 years wondering if I could have stopped it, if I'd only understood what your grandfather was describing. I didn't. I don't think anyone could have. He was very, very good at being underestimated. You couldn't have known, Adrian said, and meant it, though he could see in his grandmother's face that the guilt she'd carried for a quarter century wasn't going to release itself simply because someone finally told her it wasn't her fault. No, Eleanor agreed, but you two can still do something about it. That's more than I was ever given the chance to do. Chapter 9. The journalist Dana Okafor had covered corporate malfeasance for the better part of 3 decades, long enough to have a drawer in her apartment devoted entirely to stories she'd never been able to prove, and long enough to recognize, the moment Sophie Bennett called asking about a company called Meridian Group, that she was finally about to get one of them back. I wrote about the Kingston-Bennett collapse the year it happened, Dana told them, in an office that smelled of 2 decades of coffee, and the particular optimism of someone who refused to believe every good story was already dead. Nobody wanted to run it. My editor said 2 rich families feuding wasn't news, it was gossip with a balance sheet. I always thought that was wrong. I thought somebody built that collapse on purpose, and I never found who. Richard Ashford, Adrian said, and watched Dana's face change entirely. Where did you get that name? My grandmother. She met him twice, 25 years ago. Strategic Financial Advisory, according to his card. Dana was already moving, pulling a banker's box from beneath her desk, with the reverence of a woman handling something she'd kept far longer than she'd admitted to anyone. I chased Richard Ashford for 6 months in the year after the scandal. He worked for the bank that structured both families' credit facilities, junior enough that nobody thought to interview him, senior enough to see everything that moved through both accounts. He resigned 2 weeks after the collapse and vanished. I never found him again. Not once, in 25 years, has that name surfaced anywhere I could find. Until now, Sophie said. Because Meridian Group's ultimate ownership is a Luxembourg shell nobody can identify. Dana's smile had no humor in it at all. Miss Bennett, I would bet my entire career that if you peel back every shell in that Luxembourg structure, you find a man who's spent 25 years turning $400 million of stolen client funds into something large enough to finally finish what he started. Finish what? Adrian said, taking both companies. All the way, this time, not just breaking them against each other, owning them. Dana leaned forward. I have 25 years of research nobody would print. You two have access nobody else has ever had. Inside both companies. Inside both families. At the exact moment, he's finally moved to close the loop. If we work together, I think we can do what I couldn't do alone. And if you're wrong? Sophie asked. Then a very old man loses a lawsuit he can afford, Dana said. But Miss Bennett, Mr. Kingston, I don't think I'm wrong. I think I've been right for 25 years and simply couldn't prove it. I think you two are the proof I've been waiting for. Dana spread the contents of the banker's box across her desk, yellowed clippings, a handwritten timeline dense with crossouts, a photocopy of a business registration filed in the Caymans 18 years ago and never renewed. Ashford surfaces exactly twice after his resignation, she said, tapping the registration. Once here, incorporating something called Northgate Advisory, that dissolved after 3 years without ever filing a public transaction, and once 4 years after that, as an unnamed advisor listed in the footnotes of a completely unrelated hedge fund prospectus, the kind of footnote nobody reads except people like me, who read footnotes for a living. That's it? 25 years, and that's the entire trail? That's the entire trail I could find with a reporter's resources and a healthy persecution complex, Dana said. You two have something I never did. Legal standing to compel document production inside both companies, board-level access, and family members old enough to remember faces I've only ever had names for. I've spent 2.5 decades building the outline of this story. I think, between the three of us, we can finally fill it in. And if we do, Adrian said, you publish it. When it's ready to survive being published, and not one day before, Dana said. I've watched good stories die, because someone rushed them into print before the evidence could hold up under a libel lawyer's microscope. I am not going to spend 25 years chasing this man, just to lose him on a technicality, because we got impatient in the last mile. Sophie found, somewhat to her own surprise, that she trusted the promise. There was something in the particular patience of Dana Okafor's caution, the same patience, Sophie realized later, that had probably kept the reporter's persistence alive across a quarter-century, when every editor she'd ever had told her to let it go. That made the older woman feel, in that first meeting, less like a stranger, and more like the third ally neither Sophie nor Adrian had known they needed. Chapter 8. Break-In. The Bennett Holdings archive had a silent alarm that Marcus had insisted on installing himself 2 years earlier, over the objections of a facilities budget that considered it an unnecessary expense, and it was that alarm, and not the company's official security contractor, that texted Sophie at 2:14 in the morning with a single word: motion. She called Adrian from the car. He was already awake. She would learn, over the following weeks, that he rarely slept more than 4 hours a night, a habit he'd never examined and she never had the heart to ask about, and met her at the building's loading entrance 11 minutes later, badge in hand, expression unreadable in the dark. The archive server room door stood open. Not forced, opened, with a keycard, by someone whose access had never been revoked, because nobody had thought to check whether it should be. Someone with legitimate credentials, Sophie said, staring at the door. Not a break-in, a walk-in. Marcus arrived 12 minutes later, hair unbrushed, laptop already open, before he'd fully crossed the threshold. It took him 4 minutes to confirm what none of them wanted confirmed. The ghost account had returned, used a valid physical keycard to enter the building, and spent 6 minutes inside the server room, before leaving through the same door it had entered. 6 minutes is enough time to copy a drive, Marcus said. Not enough time to search for anything. Whoever this is, they knew exactly what they wanted, and exactly where to find it. Which means they already knew what was there, Adrian said. This isn't someone hunting for evidence. This is someone retrieving something they already knew existed. Cleaning up. Sophie pulled the building's access log, cross-referenced against the keycard's registration, and found a name that made the room go very quiet. D. Cole, Visitor Access, authorized by Kingston Global Executive Office. Adrian read it twice before he spoke, and when he did, his voice had gone somewhere Sophie hadn't heard it go before. Flat, controlled, the sound of a man deciding, in real time, not to feel something yet, because feeling it would cost him the ability to think. Damien authorized himself access to your archive, Adrian said. The same week he checked out our joint venture files and never mentioned it to me. Adrian, Sophie said his name carefully, the way you'd say it to someone standing near an edge. I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually think about the answer, instead of defending him out of habit. How long has Damien Cole worked for your family? Adrian looked at the empty box, and the visitor log, and the 11-month-old checkout card, that had been sitting in a basement the whole time, waiting for someone to finally look. 8 years, he said. I trusted him with everything. And I think I just found out that was the mistake that got Preston Hale killed. Sophie watched him carefully, recognizing in his stillness the same brittle control she'd felt the night the note appeared under her door. We don't know that yet. We know he had access. We know he had opportunity. We don't know why. Does it matter why? It might, Sophie said, because if Damien's working for Ashford out of fear, that's a different problem than if he's working for him out of greed, and a very different problem than if he's working for him because he actually believes in whatever Ashford's telling him this is. We need to know which one we're dealing with before we confront him, or we'll spook him into destroying the one channel that might actually lead us to Ashford himself. Adrian exhaled slowly, some of the rigid control easing, just slightly, at the shape of a plan replacing the shapelessness of betrayal. You're saying we use him. I'm saying we watch him, the way he's apparently been watching both of us for months. He doesn't know we know. That's the only advantage we have left. Sophie looked at the visitor log again, at the neat, ordinary entry that had just upended 8 years of Adrian's professional life. Let's not waste it. They left the archive separately, 20 minutes apart, an instinct neither of them acknowledged out loud, but both of them followed anyway. The particular, learned caution of two people who had just understood, in the space of one visitor log, exactly how close the danger had already come. Chapter 2: The Vineyard. Dana's 25 years of unpublished research included one lead she'd never been able to close, a wire transfer, buried in a regulatory filing so obscure it had taken her 3 years to even find it, moving a modest sum from a Kingston-Bennett escrow account to a vineyard property 2 hours north, purchased 11 months after the collapse under a name that turned out, after 6 phone calls and 1 favor called in from a title clerk who owed Dana from a story 20 years old, to be a shell company controlled by Richard Ashford. He bought a vineyard with the last of it, Dana said, driving them north herself because she refused, categorically, to let either of them go alone. Small operation, never produced much wine anyone heard of, but property records show renovations 8 years ago that cost more than the land was worth. The vineyard, when they reached it, looked exactly like what it was pretending to be. Modest, quiet, tended by a groundskeeper who answered Sophie's questions with the practiced vagueness of someone paid well to know nothing. But the renovation Dana had flagged wasn't cosmetic. Beneath what looked, from the drive, like an ordinary equipment barn, Marcus's research into the property's permit history had turned up a filing for reinforced subfloor construction and a climate-controlled interior, the kind of specifications Adrian realized as they walked its perimeter in the fading light, that belonged to a records vault, not a barn. Someone's been keeping something here for a long time, Sophie said. They didn't breach it, not that day, not with a groundskeeper watching from the porch, and no legal grounds to force the issue, but Adrian photographed the structure from every angle he could reach, and it was Sophie who noticed the small outbuilding set back from the main property, half-collapsed, ivy climbing through what had once been a window. That one's not on any permit filing, Marcus said, when she sent him the image. It's not on any filing at all. As far as the county's concerned, that building doesn't exist. Before they reached the outbuilding, they spent the better part of an hour in the vineyard's tasting room, posing as prospective buyers on Dana's suggestion, drawing out the groundskeeper with the kind of patient, unhurried conversation that eventually loosens even a well-trained tongue. He mentioned, almost in passing, that the owner kept a second property farther north, a mountain lodge he visited twice a year and never brought staff to, always alone, always for exactly 9 days. 9 days, Sophie repeated, once they were back in the car. That's oddly specific. Everything about this man is oddly specific, Dana said. 25 years of careful precision doesn't turn sloppy just because he's rich enough now to stop being careful. If anything, men like him get more precise the more they have to lose. Marcus, reached by phone from the road, found the mountain property within the hour, registered, like the vineyard, under a shell with no obvious link to Ashford on paper, but paying a property tax bill that traced, through a payment processor error 3 years old, that no one had ever bothered to correct, to the same Luxembourg entity, now attempting to acquire both Kingston Global and Bennett Holdings. He's been hiding in plain sight this whole time, Sophie said. 2 properties, both quiet, both patient, both waiting for exactly this moment. Then let's make sure this moment doesn't go the way he's planned it, Adrian said, and turned the car back toward the vineyard's outbuilding, the one structure on the property that still hadn't given up its secret. Inside, when they finally worked up the nerve to check, Adrian going first, because some instinct older than 8 years of boardrooms told him he'd rather be the one who found whatever was in there. They found not files, not money, but a narrow, dust-heavy room set up like it had once been lived in. A cot, a hot plate, long unplugged. A stack of newspapers, yellowed, the most recent dated 14 years back, and on the wall, taped in a neat, obsessive grid that made the hair on Sophie's arms rise, dozens of newspaper clippings, Kingston Global headlines, Bennett Holdings headlines, spanning 25 years, tracking both companies' every rise and fall with the patience of someone who had never once stopped watching. Someone lived here, Sophie said quietly. For years. Adrian found the name scratched into the underside of the cot's frame, half hidden, the letters gouged deep enough that whoever carved them had wanted them to last. V. Reyes. The former CFO, Dana breathed, coming up behind them. He didn't disappear, Adrian. Someone kept him. They stood in the small, dust-choked room for a long time without speaking, each of them absorbing the wrongness of it in their own way. Dana photographing the newspaper grid with the careful, practiced hands of someone who had documented other people's worst rooms before. Marcus, on speakerphone from the city, going very quiet when Sophie described the cot and the dead hot plate. Adrian standing in the doorway, unable, for reasons he didn't examine too closely, to make himself step fully inside. 25 years old, some of these, Dana said, crouching before a clipping near the floor, its edges soft with handling. This one's from the year of the collapse. Somebody read this exact newspaper page enough times to wear a hole through the corner where his thumb kept catching it. You think it's really him, Sophie said. Reyes. I think whoever lived in this room spent years watching both our companies from a distance, close enough to know everything, and far enough to never be seen. Dana said. That's not paranoia. That's a man who understood, better than anyone alive, exactly how dangerous it was to be found. Adrian finally made himself cross the threshold, and knelt beside the cot, and found, tucked beneath the thin mattress where a search would have to be thorough to find it, a single folded page, not a newspaper clipping this time, but a handwritten note, the ink faded nearly to nothing, addressed to no one. If you are reading this, someone finally looked hard enough to find this room, and I am no longer in it. I do not know how much time that means I had, or whether I am still alive when you read this. I know that everything either family was ever told about the collapse was a lie, built to keep 2 families from ever comparing notes long enough to find the man who actually built it. My name is Victor Reyes. I was the CFO. I saw what he did, and I have spent every year since paying for having seen it. If you have found this room, keep looking. I do not think I will have gone far. I do not think he ever lets anyone go far. There was no closing signature, beyond the name already given. But there didn't need to be one. Whoever had written it had understood, even in hiding, that the truth would eventually need more than one voice to carry it, and had left this room, this grid of newspapers, this single confession, as insurance against the possibility that his own voice might never get the chance to be heard again. Chapter 10. What the Court Remembered. It took Marcus 4 days and a favor from a former colleague, now working in public records, to trace Victor Reyes to a small apartment 2 states away, registered under a name that wasn't quite an alias. Victor R. Hayes, close enough that Sophie suspected the man himself had chosen it. Some quiet, defiant refusal to disappear completely, even while hiding. He was 61, thinner than his old employee photo, and when Sophie knocked on his door and said the name Bennett, he went so pale she thought, for one terrible second, that he might collapse in the doorway. "You shouldn't have come here," Victor said, but he let them in anyway, which told Sophie more than the words did. A man who truly wanted to stay hidden would have shut the door. "We found the vineyard," Adrian said, "the room where you were kept." Victor's hands, Sophie noticed, had a fine tremor that hadn't stopped since he'd opened the door. Kept isn't the word he'd use. He'd say protected. He told me, the year everything fell apart, that if I stayed quiet and stayed hidden, I'd be safe, and everyone who came looking for the truth would eventually stop looking. For a long time, he was right. "Who is he?" Adrian said. Not a question anymore. A demand 2 families had waited 25 years to make. Richard Ashford. Victor said the name like it cost him something. "I was CFO of the joint venture. I saw the wire transfers before anyone else did. Small ones, at first, routed through instruments so complicated, I told myself for months I was misreading them. By the time I understood what I was actually looking at, it was already done. $400 million, and both families' signatures, forged onto authorizations, neither of them ever saw." "Why didn't you go to the authorities?" Sophie asked, though she already suspected the answer would be the ugly, ordinary kind of answer that ruins people slowly, rather than all at once. "Because he came to me before I could. Told me he knew what I'd found, and told me exactly what would happen to my family if I said a word. And then, when I still hesitated, he showed me the accident that had almost killed my brother the week before, and let me understand it hadn't been an accident at all." Victor's voice cracked. "I ran. He found me 8 months later, and instead of killing me, he gave me the vineyard room and enough money to survive and told me it was mercy. I lived there for 11 years believing it was mercy. And then, one day, the door wasn't locked anymore, and there was money in an account with my new name on it, and a note that said he didn't need me quiet anymore, because he'd found a better way to keep both families busy blaming each other. I left. I've been running on my own ever since, because 11 years taught me I'll never stop being afraid of him, whether he's watching or not." Adrian felt something in his chest that had been rigid for 25 years finally, quietly, begin to break. "My father died, believing your family destroyed him," he said to Sophie, not to Victor. "Your fathers spent 25 years believing the same about mine. And the entire time, it was one man, moving pieces neither family ever saw." "He's not finished," Victor said. "If he's making a move on both companies now, it means he's closing the account. All of it. And he will not let 3 people and a journalist stop him from finishing what he's spent 25 years building." "Why did he let you go in the end?" Sophie asked. "You said the door just wasn't locked one day." Victor was quiet for a long moment, staring at hands that had spent 11 years learning to shake without his permission. "I've had a long time to think about that question. I don't think it was mercy, whatever the note said. I think he'd finally realized that keeping me somewhere he controlled meant keeping a liability he had to actively manage. Feeding me, watching me, risking someone eventually asking why a vineyard groundskeeper's cousin, or whatever story he'd built to explain me, never seemed to age the way people were supposed to. I think, by then, he'd already built Meridian large enough that he didn't need me contained anymore. He needed me forgotten. A missing man causes questions. A man nobody's looking for anymore doesn't. But we found the room, Adrian said. You found a room he thought no one would ever think to look for, because for 25 years, no one did. Victor looked between them, something sharpening in his exhausted face. That should frighten you more than it seems to. It means his confidence has a hole in it he doesn't know about yet. Men like Ashford don't survive discovering that by staying calm. Dana had been quiet through most of the exchange, taking notes with the particular restraint of a journalist who understood when a source needed space more than questions. Victor, she said gently, would you be willing to say all of this on the record? Not today, when it's safe. When we have enough corroboration that your account isn't the only thing standing between Ashford and a very good defense attorney. Victor's laugh had no humor in it. I have spent 25 years being the only person who knew the truth and the only person too afraid to say it. If saying it now means it finally means something, I'll say it into whatever microphone you put in front of me. I'm tired of being the reason this story never got told. Chapter 11. The Attempt. They moved Victor that night, against his protests, to a hotel Dana booked under her own name using cash. Old habits, she said, from a career spent protecting sources. And it was that decision, made in a parking lot at 11 at night, with the particular exhausted clarity of people who have just heard the truth for the first time, that saved his life. The break-in at his apartment happened 4 hours later. The neighbor who called it in described two men, methodical, unhurried, the kind of professionals who didn't panic when they found the apartment empty. They simply searched it thoroughly, took nothing visible, and left before police arrived, the whole operation executed with a precision that told Sophie, when she heard the report, that whoever sent them had done this before and would do it again. They weren't looking for money, Adrian said, standing in the wrecked apartment the next morning, drawers pulled and replaced with a care that made the violation feel somehow worse. They were looking for him, which means someone knew we'd found him, Sophie said. Someone who's been tracking us closely enough to know within a day. It was Marcus who found it, a data ping, buried in Bennett Holdings network logs, showing that someone had accessed Sophie's calendar and travel authorization system the same afternoon she'd booked her flight north to the vineyard. The access had come from inside the building, from a terminal registered to the executive floor. Sophie, Marcus's voice had the particular carefulness of someone about to say something he knew would hurt. It's not the ghost account this time. It's a real login. It's Harold Ferris's assistant's terminal, but the session was authenticated with a secondary credential that traces back to a device registered to Kingston Global. Sophie sat with that for a long moment. Someone at Kingston used a compromised login inside my own building to track my movements. Damien, Adrian said, and this time, there was no hesitation in it at all, only a grim, exhausted certainty. It has to be. He's the only person with access to both the archive checkout system and a plausible reason to be moving through Kingston's infrastructure without raising flags. We can't accuse him yet, Sophie said. Not without proof. If he's working for Ashford and he realizes we're onto him, he disappears, and we lose whatever thread connects him to the money. Then we don't accuse him, Adrian said. We watch him, and Sophie. He looked at her, and the exhaustion in his face had a new weight to it, something that had nothing to do with sleep. If I'm right about Damien, then I've spent 8 years working beside the man who's been feeding information to the person who killed Preston Hale, threatened you, and hunted Victor Reyes for a quarter century. I need you to understand that I am not going to let him hurt you the way he's already hurt everyone else. Sophie looked at him for a long moment, and the last of the old, inherited distance between them, the distance built by two families who'd never once sat in the same room without a lawyer present, finally, quietly, gave way to something neither of them named out loud. Then let's find the proof, she said, together. They moved Victor a second time that week, further this time, to a small coastal town, where Dana had a contact who owed her a favor large enough to cover a stranger's rent, without asking questions, and it was on the drive back from that final relocation, the two of them alone in Adrian's car for the first time since this had started, that the careful professional distance between them finally slipped, just once, into something more honest. "I keep thinking about my father," Sophie said, watching the coastline blur past the window. 25 years, and he never got to hear that voicemail proven true by anyone but his own daughter. "I don't know how to tell him what we've found without it costing him something. He's built his entire understanding of himself around surviving a war against your family. I'm about to tell him the war was never real. My grandmother's spent 25 years believing my father died, still doubting his own innocence," Adrian said. "I don't know how to give him that back, either. Some things don't unhappen just because you finally know the truth." "No," Sophie agreed. "But I think knowing it still matters, even if it comes too late to fix everything it broke." Adrian glanced at her, something in his chest settling into a shape he hadn't expected 25 years of inherited hostility to ever make room for. "For what it's worth," he said, "I don't think I could have gotten this far without you. I think I would have kept believing the version of this story I was raised on, right up until it was too late to matter." "Don't get sentimental on me, Kingston," Sophie said, but there was no edge in it at all, only something that sounded, for the first time since the Ashworth Club, almost like relief. "We still have a killer to catch." Chapter 12. Offshore. The Children's Hospital Gala had been, for as long as either of them could remember, one of the few events where Kingston and Bennett money moved through the same room, without ever quite touching. Separate tables, separate circles, a carefully choreographed avoidance that the city's society pages had long since stopped commenting on, because it had simply become the wallpaper of the event itself. This year, Adrian and Sophie arrived together. It wasn't strategy, not entirely. Marcus needed another day to finish tracing the offshore structure, and Dana had insisted, with the flat authority of someone who understood optics better than either of them, that being seen together in public, calmly, deliberately, was its own kind of evidence that the old feud no longer controlled either family's choices. But it was also, if Adrian was honest with himself, simply easier than spending another evening apart, watching his phone for a threat that might arrive from either direction. The room noticed instantly. Adrian felt it the way he'd felt 100 boardrooms recalibrate around him over the years. A ripple of attention, hastily masked, moving table to table faster than either of them could outpace it. "Everyone in this room has already decided what this means," Sophie murmured, accepting a glass of champagne she had no intention of finishing. "By the time we leave tonight, half the city will believe we're merging the companies. The other half will believe we're merging something else entirely. Does it bother you? 25 years ago, it would have started a second scandal on its own," Sophie said. "Tonight I find I mostly don't care, which either means I've grown wiser, or considerably more reckless. I haven't decided which." It was near the dessert course that Adrian saw him, silver-haired, unremarkable, moving through the crowd with the particular fluid ease of a man who had spent a lifetime being underestimated in rooms exactly like this one. He didn't approach their table. He didn't need to. He simply passed close enough, on his way to the bar, to let his gaze rest on both of them for one unhurried second too long. The kind of look that communicated recognition, without ever admitting to it. "Adrian." Sophie's hand found his beneath the table, steadying rather than romantic, though the distinction, Adrian noted somewhere, in the part of his mind not currently occupied with cold dread, was beginning to blur. "Don't react, not here. That's him," Adrian said quietly. "I've never seen his face before tonight, and I know that's him." "I know." Sophie's voice had gone very level, the particular calm she reached for whenever the fear underneath it was real. "He wanted us to see him. He's telling us he knows exactly how close we've gotten, and he's not worried enough to hide from a room full of witnesses." Neither of them slept much that night. By morning, Marcus had confirmed what the gala had only implied: a guest list entry for R. Ashford, +1, submitted through a donor account that had quietly funded the hospital's pediatric wing for 11 years, under a name. Until now, no one had thought to connect to anything at all. The offshore accounts, when Marcus finally cracked the structure Ashford had spent 25 years building, formed a shape almost beautiful in its patience: $400 million, seeded into a Luxembourg holding entity within a year of the original collapse, grown for 2 decades through investments quiet enough to never attract attention, and finally, 18 months ago, consolidated into a single vehicle, Meridian Group. He didn't just steal the money and disappear, Marcus said, projecting the account structure across Sophie's office wall at nearly midnight. The three of them and Dana gathered around it like it was a body they were identifying. He grew it, patiently, for 25 years, and now he's using it to finish the job he started, buying both companies outright, this time with money that used to belong to both of them. That's not just theft, Dana said. That's the single most patient act of corporate revenge I've encountered in 30 years of doing this. It's not revenge, Sophie said slowly, staring at the account trail. Look at the timeline. He didn't wait 25 years because he wanted to savor it. He waited because it took him 25 years to grow $400 million into enough capital to actually buy 2 multinational companies outright. This was never about hurting our families for the sake of hurting us. We were never the point. Then what was? We were the cover, Sophie said. 2 families so busy hating each other that nobody ever looked past us to the money. He built the feud to buy himself 25 years of silence, and now that he's finally rich enough to finish it, he doesn't need the feud anymore. He needs us gone. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, looking at the tangle of shell companies on the wall. Luxembourg, the Caymans, a numbered account in Zurich that Marcus flagged with a small red asterisk, and the note UBO match, R. Ashford, 94% confidence. There's a board meeting in 6 days, Adrian said finally. Meridian's tender offer closes at the end of the month. If we're right about who's behind it, he's going to be in that room, or close enough to it, when the vote happens. He's spent 25 years staying invisible. He's not going to let himself become visible now, unless he has no choice. Sophie said. Sophie. Dana's voice had gone careful, protective in the way of someone who had watched enough stories like this one end badly. A man who's killed to protect a secret for 25 years isn't going to walk into a public room and confess because you've assembled a good spreadsheet. If we corner him, he will not go quietly. I have seen men like this before. They do not surrender to a room full of witnesses. They surrender to the certainty that resistance costs them more than compliance does, and building that certainty takes more than good evidence. It takes patience, and it takes making sure every exit is already closed before he realizes the room has changed shape around him. I know, Sophie said. That's why we're not going to corner him. We're going to make him think he's already won, right up until the moment he isn't. They worked through the night refining it, Marcus building the technical trail that would need to hold up under a federal prosecutor's scrutiny, Dana drafting the story that would run the moment it was safe to run it, Sophie drafting the false document that would give Damien exactly the version of the plan Ashford needed to believe. Adrian, for his part, spent most of the night doing the one thing none of the others could do for him, sitting across from his own reflection in a darkened office window, trying to understand how 8 years of trusting a man completely had left him this blind. You're not responsible for what he did, Sophie told him, close to 3 in the morning, finding him still there long after the others had gone home to sleep in shifts. Ashford spent 25 years learning exactly how to find the fracture point in people who are drowning. Damien's mother's medical bills were his fracture point. That's not a failure of your judgment. That's the particular, patient cruelty of a man who's had a quarter century of practice. I hired him, Adrian said. I promoted him. I told my board he was the best decision I'd made as CEO. And in 6 days, Sophie said, you're going to be the CEO who exposed the man who bought him. I think, when this is over, that's the sentence people are actually going to remember. Adrian looked at her for a long moment in the window's reflection. 2 exhausted faces superimposed against a city neither of their families had ever managed to fully trust each other in. You're very good at this, he said, making the unbearable thing sound survivable. It's the job, Sophie said. I've had a lot of practice telling frightened board members the worst day of their professional lives isn't actually the end of the company. Turns out the skill transfers. Chapter 13. Setting the Trap. The plan Sophie built over the following 3 days had the particular elegance of something designed by a person who had spent her career finding the exact pressure point in a contract that made an opponent negotiate against their own interests without realizing it. Ashford's entire strategy depends on nobody connecting him to Meridian before the tender offer closes, she explained, to a room that now included Adrian, Dana, Marcus, and, after a conversation, Adrian still hadn't fully forgiven himself for needing to have, Eleanor, who had insisted, with the particular immovability of an 83-year-old who had waited 25 years for this exact fight, on being included. So we let him believe that's still true. We let the board vote proceed on schedule. We let Meridian believe it's about to win. And then, Eleanor asked, and then we make sure the person who has to stand up in that room and finally reveal who really controls Meridian isn't a whistleblower he can discredit, or a journalist he can dismiss as speculation. Sophie looked at Adrian. It's the 2 of us, the Kingston hair and the Bennett hair, standing together, presenting 25 years of evidence in the one room where every board member from both companies will be watching. He built this feud so we'd never do that. So we do exactly that, in front of everyone, before he can stop it. He'll know something's wrong the moment we're seen together in that room, Adrian said. He has eyes inside both companies. Damien alone gives him that. Which is exactly why Damien is the key to the whole thing, Sophie said. We don't cut him out. We feed him exactly the version of the plan we want Ashford to believe. That we're planning to expose Meridian's ownership quietly, through regulators, after the vote. Something slow enough that Ashford thinks he still has time to finish the acquisition first, and bury the evidence after. You want to use my own COO to lie to the man who's been using him for years, Adrian said. I want to use the one channel we know for certain reaches Ashford directly, Sophie said. Adrian, I know what it costs you. I watched what it cost you to say his name out loud the first time. But he's the reason Preston Hale is dead. Let him be useful for something, before this is over. Adrian sat with that for a long moment, and when he finally nodded, it wasn't relief on his face. It was the particular grief of a man closing a door on 8 years of misplaced trust, deliberately, with his eyes open. All right, he said, let's bait the trap. Eleanor stayed after the others had gone, and found Adrian alone in the kitchen, staring at nothing in particular the way he did. She'd noticed over the years, whenever something had finally cracked open a feeling he didn't yet know how to hold. Your father would be proud of you, she said. Not for the company, for this. For being willing to sit in a room with a Bennett, and call it strategy, instead of surrender. I don't think he'd recognize the man who's about to do this, Adrian said. He spent the last 10 years of his life certain the Bennetts destroyed him. I'm about to prove he was wrong about the one thing he never stopped believing. He was wrong about a great many things. In the end, Eleanor said, not unkindly. Your father was a good man who spent 25 years pouring his grief into the wrong container, because the right one, the truth, wasn't available to him yet. That's not weakness, Adrian. That's what grief does to people who don't have the facts they need to grieve correctly. You're giving your father, and yourself, the facts he never got. Don't mistake that for betraying him. It's the only thing that could ever actually honor him. Adrian didn't trust his voice enough to answer that directly, so he simply reached across the table and covered his grandmother's hand with his own, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. The kitchen quiet, except for the sound of Sophie and Marcus's voices still murmuring logistics in the next room. Two families, finally, working the same problem from the same table. Chapter 14. The Man in the Boardroom. The false version of the plan reached Damien Cole exactly the way Sophie predicted it would, through a document left, deliberately, in a shared drive Damien had access to, but no obvious reason to check, time-stamped to look like an oversight rather than a trap. He took the bait within 6 hours. Marcus's monitoring, legal, this time, run through Kingston Global's own compliance team, with a warrant Priya secured on the strength of the archive discrepancy alone, caught the outbound transmission at 11:47 that night. An encrypted file, sent from a personal device Damien had never once used for company business, to an address that traced, after a 40-minute chain of shell relays, to a satellite phone registered to the same Luxembourg entity that owned Meridian Group. "He's confirmed for you," Marcus told Adrian, the next morning, in a voice that had none of its usual lightness. "I'm sorry, I know he's someone you trusted," Adrian said. Yes, the confrontation happened not in a boardroom, but in Adrian's own office, door closed, Priya standing witness with a recorder running, because Sophie had insisted, correctly, that this conversation needed to exist somewhere other than memory. 8 years. Damien, Adrian said, sliding the transmission log across the desk. "I want to hear you tell me, it isn't what it looks like." Damien Cole, to his credit or his ruin, didn't try. Something in his face simply gave way, the particular collapse of a man who has spent a long time performing confidence he stopped feeling years ago. "He found me when I was 26, Damien said quietly. "Buried in debt from my mother's medical bills, about to lose everything. He offered to make it disappear in exchange for information. Nothing dramatic at first, just details, meeting schedules, who was meeting with whom. I told myself it was harmless. And then it wasn't. And then Preston Hale found something in the Meridian filings that would have exposed the ownership structure before the tender offer even closed, and Ashford asked me to make sure he never got the chance to present it to the board." Damien's voice had gone hollow. "I didn't kill him, Adrian. I swear to you, I didn't. I told Ashford where to find him. I told myself that was different. I have spent every day since telling myself that was different. It wasn't," Adrian said, and the two words carried more weight than anything else he'd said in the entire conversation. "Where is he, Damien? Right now, today?" Damien was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally answered, it was with the particular relief of a man setting down something he'd been carrying so long, he'd forgotten it had a weight at all. "The vineyard," he said. "He's been living there for 6 months, overseeing the final acquisition personally. He doesn't trust anyone else to close it. Not after Preston, not after Reyes." "The board vote is in 3 days, Priya said quietly. "If he's at the vineyard, then that's where this ends," Adrian said. "Not in a boardroom he can control. On his own ground, where he thinks he's still invisible." Sophie, listening from the doorway, felt the particular vertigo of watching a plan she'd built on paper suddenly acquire the weight of something that would actually happen. "We can't go in without protection," she said. "If he's had a man killed to protect this, a hostile confrontation on his own property is exactly the kind of situation that gets people hurt." "Agreed," Priya said, already reaching for her phone. "I have a contact at the U.S. Attorney's Office who's been quietly briefed on the Meridian ownership question for the past week, in anticipation of exactly this. If we can get him actionable evidence of intent to obstruct, and Damien's testimony, recorded, gives us that, I can have federal agents staged within response distance of that vineyard by tomorrow evening." Then we're not going there to confront him alone, Adrian said. We're going there to make sure he says it out loud, in a place, and in front of people, who can make it stick. He looked at Damien, still seated, hollowed out by his own confession, in a way that made him look, for the first time in the 8 years Adrian had known him, genuinely young. You're coming with us. Adrian, I don't think. You owe Preston Hale a debt you can't pay him, Adrian said, and you're not going to pay it by hiding from what you did. You're going to look Ashford in the eye when this ends, and you're going to be the reason his own accomplice was the one who finally brought it down. That's the only version of this that gives Preston's death any meaning at all. Damien was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally nodded, something in his posture had already begun the slow, difficult work of becoming a different kind of man than the one who'd walked into that office an hour earlier. Chapter 15. The Vineyard. Again, they arrived at dusk, the same golden, deceptive light that had made the property look harmless the first time. And this time, Sophie noticed what she'd missed before. The discreet security presence, disguised as groundskeeping staff. The cameras mounted in false irrigation posts. The particular stillness of a place built to look empty, while never actually being unwatched. Richard Ashford met them on the porch of the main house, before they'd even reached the door, and Sophie understood, in the first 3 seconds of seeing him, why Eleanor's 25-year-old memory had never quite resolved his face. He had the specific, unremarkable competence of a man built entirely to be underestimated, mid-60s, silver-haired, dressed like a vintner, rather than the architect of the largest theft either family had ever suffered. Miss Bennett, Mr. Kingston. His voice was calm, almost warm, the voice of a man who had spent 25 years believing he would never have to use it in this particular conversation, and had, apparently, prepared for it anyway. I confess I'm impressed. It took your fathers 25 years to look past each other. It took you considerably less. Where's Damien? Adrian said, though he already suspected the answer. Damien had insisted on coming, on being the one to face what he'd helped build, a penance Adrian hadn't been able to talk him out of. Inside, being sensible, for once. Ashford's gaze moved to Sophie with an interest that had nothing warm left in it at all. You found Victor. That was clever. I'll admit I underestimated how far you'd both dig, once you finally stopped digging at each other. You built the feud, Sophie said. You forged the authorizations. And you stole $400 million from 2 families, and spent 25 years letting them destroy each other over it, while you grew rich enough to finish the job. I built an opportunity, Ashford corrected, with the mild, terrible precision of a man who had told himself this story so many times he'd come to believe its grammar. 2 families who'd spent a generation building fortunes on each other's backs, too proud and too wealthy to ever really need what I took. I simply redirected some of it toward someone who'd actually earned the intelligence to use it. Your families never even noticed the money was gone, until they'd already decided to blame each other for it. I barely had to lift a finger after the first 6 months. Preston Hale noticed, Adrian said. And you had him killed. Something in Ashford's composure tightened, the first genuine crack Sophie had seen in it. Preston Hale was 71 years old, and about to hand a board of directors evidence that would have unwound 25 years of careful work in a single meeting. I have never enjoyed the harder decisions this required. I have simply never allowed myself the luxury of avoiding them. The board vote closes in 3 days, Sophie said. And every piece of evidence we've gathered, the vineyard, Victor Reyes, the offshore structure, Damien's confession, is already sitting with the SEC, with Dana Okafor's editor, and with a federal prosecutor who used to work with my father's firm. You didn't come here to stop us, Mr. Ashford. You came here because you already know it's over, and some part of you wanted to see, one more time, whether the 2 families you spent 25 years dividing would actually manage to stand in the same room. You could have simply asked your fathers to forgive each other, Ashford said finally, and there was something almost wistful in it, the closest thing to genuine feeling Sophie had heard from him all evening. Instead, you asked what actually happened. I confess, I never accounted for that. I built an architecture designed to survive two proud men's pride. I never imagined it would be undone by their children's curiosity. You underestimated us the same way you underestimated Elias Cho, Sophie said. The same way you underestimated Preston Hale. The same way you underestimated Victor Reyes, who kept a note under his own cot for 11 years, because some part of him always believed someone would eventually come looking. Something in Ashford's face tightened at Victor's name, the first flicker of something that might have been regret, or might simply have been the recognition of a miscalculation. Victor was the closest thing I ever had to a mistake, he said quietly. I should have made a different choice that first year. I told myself keeping him was mercy. I think, if I'm honest with myself for the first time in 25 years, it was cowardice. I couldn't bring myself to finish what I'd started, and I couldn't bring myself to undo it either. So I simply kept him, the way you keep a debt you can't bring yourself to pay or forgive. And Preston Hale, Adrian said. Was that mercy too? Ashford's composure, for the first time all evening, didn't hold. Preston Hale left me no room for mercy, he said, and his voice had gone flat, stripped of the vintner's warmth it had carried since they'd arrived. I have spent 25 years building something large enough to finally set right what your family's pride cost me at 26 years old, passed over for partnership by men who never once asked what I actually understood about the numbers. They were too important to check themselves. I am not sorry for what I built. I am only sorry it required the things it required. That's not an explanation, Sophie said. That's a eulogy for the version of yourself you'd have had to be to feel bad about any of it. For a long moment, Richard Ashford said nothing at all, and in the silence, Sophie watched 25 years of careful, patient architecture, finally, quietly, collapse. Chapter 16. What the Truth Costs. He didn't run. That surprised Sophie more than anything else that evening. Not the confrontation, not the calm, terrible confession, but the fact that when the federal agents Dana's contact had quietly arranged arrived 40 minutes later, Richard Ashford simply set down the glass of the vineyard's own wine he'd been holding since they'd arrived, and walked toward them without a word of protest, as though some part of him had been waiting 25 years to finally stop hiding. It's not relief, he told Sophie, in the last moment before they led him away, when she asked, almost against her own will, whether he felt anything at all. It's exhaustion. You'll understand it eventually, Miss Bennett, if you ever spend a quarter century building something only you can see. The board vote, 3 days later, was not the vote Meridian Group had spent months engineering. With Ashford's ownership publicly confirmed, with Damian Cole's testimony, and Victor Reyes's account entered into the federal filing, and with Dana Okafor's story running above the fold the same morning, Meridian's tender offer collapsed before the opening bell, institutional support evaporating within hours, the committed 19% revealed as exactly the kind of thin, opportunistic loyalty that vanishes the moment a acquirer's name becomes radioactive. Kingston Global and Bennett Holdings, freed of the threat that had forced them together, discovered, slowly, and not without real argument, that they no longer particularly wanted to go back to being enemies. Our fathers spent 25 years hating each other over a crime neither of them committed, Adrian told the combined board, 6 weeks later, in a room that held both families for the first time since the collapse that started everything. I don't know how to give either of them back the years that cost, but I know what it would mean if we let his lie outlive him anyway, just because it's familiar. Harold Ferris, to his credit, was the first Bennett board member to extend his hand. Damian Cole was not prosecuted for Preston Hale's death. The evidence, in the end, supported dereliction and conspiracy to conceal, rather than murder itself. a distinction that gave Adrian no comfort at all. But he resigned before the board could vote to remove him, and testified fully against Ashford, in exchange for a plea that would keep him out of Preston's case's harshest exposure. Adrian never spoke to him again. Victor Reyes, released at last from 11 years of hiding and 14 more of running, gave a single interview to Dana Okafor, and then asked, quietly, never to be contacted about any of it again. Sophie made sure he got that. And Eleanor Kingston, when Adrian finally told her the whole truth, Ashford, the confession, the 25 years finally accounted for, sat in her garden for a long time without speaking, and then said only, "Your grandfather always said that boy had bigger ambitions than his position warranted." I don't think either of us understood, at the time, exactly how right he was. Sophie's father took longer to absorb it than anyone. He listened to his daughter recount the entire arc. Elias Cho's voicemail, the vineyard, Victor Reyes, the offshore trail that finally closed a 25-year-old wound, sitting perfectly still at the same kitchen table where he'd once told her where to find a cassette tape he'd never had the courage to play. When she finished, he didn't speak for a long time. "I spent 25 years hating a man who never did anything to me," he said finally. "I taught you to hate him too, without ever meaning to. I'm sorry for that, Sophie. I don't think there's a version of sorry that actually covers it, but I want you to hear me say it anyway." "You didn't know," Sophie said. "No, but I could have kept looking. Elias tried to tell me, and I let my own certainty bury the one piece of evidence that might have ended this a decade earlier. I don't know how to forgive myself for that. I'm not sure I should." He looked at his daughter for a long moment, something unfamiliar and tender working its way into a face that had spent 25 years set hard against a grief he'd never properly named. "I am, however, extraordinarily proud of the woman who finally finished what I was too afraid to." Kingston Global's board voted, 3 weeks after Ashford's arrest, to release a full public accounting of the original scandal, a decision that cost the company a difficult quarter of press scrutiny, and bought it, in the years that followed, something no amount of quiet strategy ever could have: the reputation of a company that had chosen the truth over its own comfort, even when the truth was expensive. Bennett Holdings did the same, a week later, in a joint statement that ran under both companies' letterhead for the first time in 25 years, a small, symbolic gesture that made the business pages for exactly one news cycle, and made Eleanor Kingston, when she read it over breakfast, set down her coffee and simply sit with it for a long, quiet while, feeling, for the first time in a quarter century, something that resembled peace. You have reached the end of Only the Killer Knew Her Name by Serena Locke. From a vanished fortune to a hostile takeover, from missing records to buried witnesses, this story followed Adrian Kingston and Sophie Bennett as they stepped beyond inherited hatred and searched for the truth their families were never meant to find. They were raised to blame each other. They were taught to protect the family name. But as the evidence surfaced, they discovered that the real enemy was never the family across the table. It was the person standing in the shadows, using silence, money, and fear to keep the truth hidden for 25 years. Only the Killer Knew Her Name reminds us that lies can divide families, silence can protect criminals, and the past will always return when the truth has been buried alive. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. If this story kept you listening, kindly like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who enjoys mystery, suspense, corporate betrayal, family secrets, and emotional thrillers. Until the next audiobook, remember, a lie can hide behind many names, but the truth only needs one witness to speak.